My name's Naomi. 2 years ago, I gave up my apartment, my car, and half my savings to help my brother-in-law build his dream. He called me family. Then he called me a burden. He erased my name from the company I helped create, stole my work, and told people I was just staying in the basement. But the silence I gave him, it wasn't weakness. It was the quiet before I bought him out. Now he's the one knocking on my door. What do you say when the man who humiliated you comes back begging? Do you forgive him, or let him feel what erasure tastes like? I moved into Elise's basement 2 years ago, just after my divorce finalized, and my lease expired on the same day. It wasn't meant to be permanent. I told her, just a couple months, and she nodded without looking up from her phone. The basement wasn't finished, cold in the winter, humid in the summer. No windows, no door between me and the washer-dryer hum. It wasn't a guest room. It was a storage unit that breathes. I told myself it was enough. I was safe. I was rebuilding. My days became a sequence of quiet tasks, folding clothes I didn't wear, picking up my nieces from school, scrubbing dishes I never dirtied. Every motion felt useful, even if no one noticed. That helped. For a while. Colton didn't say much to me, but somehow, his silence filled every corner of the house. When he was home, the air changed. Conversations shortened. My footsteps got quieter. He didn't have to say it. I knew I was extra. Lately, though, the silence felt heavier. Like something waiting to be said, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to pretend I didn't hear it anymore. Thanksgiving was coming. Elise had already started planning the seating chart with her girls, cutting construction paper leaves, writing everyone's names in glitter pens, everyone's except mine. I was in the kitchen, peeling sweet potatoes, when Colton passed behind me and glanced at the table setup. "Don't waste the good linens," he said, grabbing a bottle of mineral water from the fridge. "It's just you. Just me." It landed like a flick to the ear, sharp, annoying, and meant to look like nothing. I didn't respond. I just folded the napkins. Cotton blend, soft cream, the good ones. I folded them anyway, even if mine would never make it to the table. Later that night, I was pulling out the side cabinet to grab dish towels when I saw it. A napkin. Not just any, the one I'd hand-stitched for Elise's birthday 2 years ago. A soft gray with a deep blue S embroidered in one corner. S for Sable, for me. At the party, I handed Elise a wrapped box of 12, tied with raffia. She opened it, smiled wide, and said, "Colton always finds the most thoughtful things." I remember the way he looked at me, flat and daring me to correct her. I didn't. Back then, I thought letting her believe that was kindness, that it kept peace. Now, I looked at that napkin and felt my hand curl into a fist. I folded it carefully and slid it into my purse, not out of nostalgia, but because some things don't belong buried in drawers. Upstairs, laughter filled the living room. The TV played reruns of a holiday cooking show. Elise and the girls passed around a bowl of popcorn. Colton barked out a laugh that shook the floorboards. I sat at the small table in the kitchen, alone, with a plate of lukewarm green beans and leftover casserole no one wanted. No one had said, "Join us." No one had said, "Thanks for helping." No one had said anything at all. That's the thing about being invisible. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in slices. No eye contact here. A missing place card there. A joke you're not included in. A napkin someone else took credit for. And then one day, you look around and realize you're not part of the picture anymore. You're the smudge someone forgot to erase. When you make yourself small for too long, people forget you were ever tall. And I was tired of folding. Saturday morning came with that still kind of silence only a half-finished marriage and a house not your own can offer. I carried the snack boxes to Brewer Creative like I'd done before. No one asked. I just knew the team had a long planning day ahead. It wasn't far. The office was still in the same converted warehouse we found when Colton asked me for help finding office space, before I became invisible. The lobby looked better than I remembered. The marble reception desk, the mid-century chairs, the same brushed gold finish on the handles, all pieces I'd chosen. When money was tight, I found second-hand deals, repurposed furniture, even made a few design calls myself. But now, no one remembered that. A young man at the front desk looked up. "Delivery?" he asked. I nodded. It was easier than explaining. I moved through the hall, noticing posters lining the walls, taglines I'd written, color palettes I'd suggested. The mission statement that had come from a sleepless night, scribbled on a napkin over bad coffee, and a legal pad full of crossed-out names. I passed desks full of people who didn't look up. That's the funny thing about ghosts. You only notice them when they rattle chains. And I'd stopped doing that a long time ago. Years back, before the logo existed, before the investors, Colton sat in my living room with an idea and zero plan. No brand name, no structure. Elise told him to talk to me because Sable knows how to make things real. I did. And then I disappeared. Back when Brewer Creative was just an idea, I sold my car. Not fancy, but paid off. Took what little was in my savings, funded 6 months of the business myself. Colton promised me equity, once things stabilize. Said it didn't make sense to add my name to the LLC just yet. I trusted that. We built pitch decks together. I wrote most of them. The first investor used my deck to decide. My email wasn't even CC'd. When the legal paperwork arrived weeks later, I asked. He waved it off. "Timing, Sable. You know how messy early equity can get." I did, but I nodded anyway. I remember standing in the same hallway 3 years ago with that folder in my hands, watching Colton shake hands and sign papers I helped write, and no one offered me a pen. I helped build that room, but they made sure I'd never get a key. That Saturday, they were holding a planning session in the upstairs conference room. Doors closed, voices muffled. I heard my name once, then it stopped. I stepped closer, maybe 2 feet from the glass door. I wasn't eavesdropping. Not really. I just wanted to know what came next for a business I used to bleed for. A woman with a sleek ponytail stepped out and froze. "Sorry," she said. "This space is for team only. Can I help you with something?" I blinked. "No, I was just leaving snacks for Elise." "Oh, sure." She smiled too long, too bright. Like I was the PTA mom who wandered into a private briefing at the Pentagon. I walked past her, dropped the boxes in the break room, and left. Elise had been there. I saw her through the glass. She looked up as I left, held my eye for a second, and looked away. On the drive home, I turned off the radio. I didn't want noise. I wanted quiet, controlled, manageable silence, not the kind that echoes someone else's dismissal. I thought about that pitch deck, the investor call. The first client I brought in from a church fundraiser where I stood in heels for 4 hours beside Colton, pretending he came up with everything on his own. You can only be humble until it becomes self-erasure. That's what hit me. It wasn't that I didn't exist. It's that I let them pretend I didn't. I had ideas. Vision. Money, too. I wasn't just an assistant. I was part of the foundation. They didn't forget. They chose to write over me in pen, like I was a typo in their origin story. For years, I'd told myself silence was strength, that it was better to keep peace than speak truth. But peace built on erasure, that's not peace, that's erasing yourself. I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I wanted to flip the damn thing. I showed up at the office that Friday with 2 bags of lunch orders in my arms and a calmness I hadn't felt in months. Elise said they were short on hands for the catered drop-off, so I said I'd help, not because I wanted to, because it felt easier than saying no. The receptionist blinked at me like I was someone out of place. "You delivering?" she asked, half turning back to her monitor. "No, just dropping food for Elise's team," I answered without offering more. The Slack thread had gone out that morning, listing everyone's preferences: Colton's gluten-free option, Melissa's allergy, Ty's vegan switch. But my name hadn't been there. When I texted Elise, she replied, "Oh, I didn't know if you were eating with us." The receptionist pointed to the break room. "They're all set up in the main space. Just leave those on the counter." So I did. Then I pulled a pack of dry crackers from my purse, leaned on the hallway railing, and watched through the glass walls as the rest of the staff unwrapped sandwiches, salads, sides, and cookies. I helped coordinate but wasn't invited to touch. No one looked at me. Nobody offered a plate. It wasn't about the food. It never was. It was about being seen, or not. After lunch, I lingered longer than I should have, mostly because I couldn't stand going back to the basement just yet. Colton stood near the far end of the main space, rallying the team like he was prepping them for battle. "We're entering a new quarter," he said, clapping his hands. "Momentum matters more than comfort. And let's be honest, some people mistake presence for contribution." A few interns chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. One of them glanced at me, and Colton didn't stop. Just because someone's in the room doesn't mean they've earned the seat. It hit harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't heard worse, but because this was public, calculated, said loud enough for the walls to hold it. Elise shifted in her chair but didn't speak. Her hand gripped her coffee. Her eyes never met mine. I stayed until the room cleared out, then walked to the break room to grab my purse. Colton followed me in, like it was nothing, like the air hadn't shifted. "You good?" he asked casually, pouring himself sparkling water. "You always talk about me like that?" I asked. He smirked. "Come on, Sable. Don't make this weird. You're family." He said family, like it was a favor. Then added, "Let's not confuse being tolerated with being needed." And there it was. He said it. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him the moment of impact he wanted. I just nodded once and walked past him. He didn't try to stop me. In the parking lot, I stood by my car, keys in hand, and felt the silence settle into something heavier. He said it. He really said it. For years, I'd wondered if I was being too sensitive, reading too much into glances, the missing name tags, the edits to group emails. I gave him the benefit of the doubt until there was no doubt left. I was never part of this. Not really. I was support staff without a contract, a creative mind without a title, a woman who wrote the story but wasn't allowed to read it out loud. They didn't just remove me. They rewrote me. And they made sure my part didn't survive the first draft. I threw the salad someone finally offered me, hours late, into the trash. Got in the car, started the engine, and sat still for a minute. I whispered into the quiet. Now I know. No more guessing. No more giving the benefit of the doubt. Just facts. He said it. Finally, I don't have to imagine anymore. The company preview event was on a Sunday afternoon. Elise asked me to help coordinate the catering, said it would mean a lot if I were there. I showed up early, carrying platters and trying to forget I used to plan these events, not set up chairs for them. They'd booked the back half of the office space, turned the open floor into a staged lounge area. Velvet chairs, accent lighting, corporate gloss. Everyone was in branded polos except me. I wore beige. I knew better now. The presentation was for a major campaign, a rebranding for a legacy business in town, the kind of account Brewer Creative once begged to pitch. I knew the campaign the moment the screen lit up. I'd storyboarded it 2 years ago, before I became background noise. They kept the idea but stripped the signature. No credits, no mention, just clean visuals, clean names, and none of mine. I stayed in the back row, didn't ask for a seat up front. I watched. One of the interns leaned over to someone else and whispered, "Is she a client?" I smiled, quietly. The screen flickered again. A tagline I'd written slid across, built by tradition, reclaimed by trust. It landed with a pause, the kind of pause you design for emphasis. Colton had once said that line was the heartbeat of the pitch. Today, it rolled off the screen like a jingle someone found online. Then came the voiceover. Not mine. Some young woman's tone, polished, high, without the weight of living behind it, read my script like she was ordering lattes. I looked at Colton across the room. He gave a nod, not one of acknowledgement. A nod like a waiter gives when they've brought the right meal to the wrong person. That was the moment I knew. They hadn't just moved on from me. They'd kept the work and deleted the person, trimmed me like fat from a script. Later, I found Elise alone near the sidebar, checking her phone like she was busy. I walked over and said it plain. You knew that was mine." She looked up. "Sable?" "No," I said. "Don't sable me," she sighed. "It's not worth fighting over. You know how Colton gets. If I'd said something, he would have made it a thing." I kept my voice steady. "What would it take for you to say my name in that room?" She blinked. That question sat heavier than I meant it to. I'm keeping peace here, she said. Don't make me choose. She already had. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat on the basement floor and pulled out the old hard drive I never threw away, plugged it into my laptop, waited for the folders to load. It was all there. My files, the original pitch video, my voice, my tone, my rhythm, my words. I watched the version I'd built. No edits, no filters, just the truth. Then I uploaded it to my private cloud, named the file version 0. Password protected. I didn't know when I'd need it, but I knew now I would. They deleted my name from their project. I was about to write my own. I didn't sleep Sunday night. I laid flat, staring at the unfinished ceiling above my borrowed mattress, listening to the water pipes knock in the walls like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The presentation, the erased credit, Elise's words, "Don't make me choose." As if she hadn't already. My laptop sat on the floor, half charged. I opened it, not to check email, but to dig. Not for them, for me. I started opening old folders, decks I'd designed, copy drafts, script outlines. Then I found it. Naomi Pitch Final. I hadn't touched it in over 3 years. Dated 6 weeks before the company was officially registered. I clicked it open. It was all still there. My words, my plan, the color schemes, the mock tagline, the timeline. Everything we built Brewer Creative on. And I remembered what it felt like to build with excitement instead of caution, to believe people would credit you simply because it was right. I didn't cry. But I did sit in that quiet basement for a long while, reading my own words like I didn't recognize them. Monday morning, I put on jeans, a black tee, and pulled my hair back. No makeup, no earrings. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just needed to move. The cafe on Jefferson Street had changed names, but the layout hadn't. Same old tile, same faded leather booth by the corner window. Colton and I used to meet there in the early days. He'd scribble his half-formed ideas on napkins, and I'd translate them into something coherent. Back then, he called me the Bridge. I ordered a coffee, black, no cream, took my laptop out and opened a blank doc. New folder, reclaim. I didn't know what it would be yet. Not a business, not exactly. But I knew it wouldn't belong to him. Not again. The document filled slowly. First with bullets, then with names, then a section titled, "What I'll Never Let Slide Again." That afternoon, I found myself digging through an old Gmail thread. I remembered Colton had once sent me something before the LLC was filed. Something that, if it existed, would be more than symbolic. There it was. Subject line, "In case I forget later." He wrote, "Once this works, I'll make you an official co-founder. No one's done more than you." I stared at the screen, the date, the signature. No legal jargon, but enough. I forwarded it to Nico, an old friend from college now working corporate law in Dallas. He replied in less than an hour. "If that's dated before the formation doc and you contributed funds or intellectual work, we have leverage." I didn't respond right away. I just read his message again. Then Colton's. I wasn't erased. I was postponed. Tuesday came and went in quiet planning. I didn't say anything to Elise. I didn't walk around the house heavier than usual. I just began collecting slides, drafts, receipts, a spreadsheet with client names I'd personally brought in before the rebrand. 3 of them were still listed on the company site. I wasn't angry anymore. I was strategic. By Wednesday, the fog that had held me in place for years began to clear. I still lived in a basement, but I didn't feel buried. The last file I made that night was titled Proposal V1. It had no logo, just my name at the top. And when I whispered to myself before turning off the light, it wasn't a threat. It was a truth. This isn't war, this is reclamation. Thursday morning started with gray light slipping through the basement vent. I hadn't slept much, not out of stress, but calculation. My mind had shifted gears. Emotion was in the passenger seat now. Strategy had the wheel. I met Nico at a small cafe a few blocks off the square. Not our usual spot. This place had no memory attached to it, and I liked that. He brought his laptop and a copy of the draft agreement I forwarded. "The original version," he said, tapping the document. "See this? Strategic co-founder. That's your title in the early draft. I nodded, watching the steam rise off my coffee. He flipped to another tab. And this was sent to the first investor before the LLC was finalized. Email chain confirms it. I didn't smile. I breathed. This isn't a ghost, he said. It's leverage. We spent the next hour walking through timelines, emails, version histories. I made backups of everything, stored it in 3 separate encrypted clouds, printed hard copies, and labeled file folders with real intent. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was building a wall of facts, something solid, not emotional. And this time, it would have my name on it. That afternoon, I took my laptop to a quiet co-working space down by the post office. I sat by the window, natural light, clean desk, no history. I opened my Reclaim folder and began organizing campaign sketches, some old, some new. I was halfway through formatting a proposal when I heard a voice behind me. Whoa, this looks really good. I turned. Ty, young designer, Brewer's team. He glanced at the layout, then at me. Were you like the original CEO or something? I looked at him for a second, not startled, just surprised anyone noticed. Something like that, I said. He smiled, then shrugged and went to the coffee bar. That moment shouldn't have mattered, but it did. It reminded me that outside the walls Colton had built, people still saw me, the me who created, who built, who carried the weight before it had a name. And for the first time, I didn't want my name back on their wall. I wanted it in a place where no one could take it off again. That night, I sat cross-legged on the floor with stacks of printed emails, invoices, saved chats. I built a map, Brewer Creative's entire evolution, client by client, pitch by pitch. My fingerprints were everywhere, not out of bitterness, out of accuracy. Then I created 2 pitch decks. One was a claim, a proof of ownership for legal leverage. The other was a beginning. I called it Slate. Fresh, unattached, mine. I reached out to 3 former clients with a casual, "Let's catch up" message. Nothing accusatory. Just presence. By midnight, one had already replied. "Let me know if you're building something. I'd love to hear it." I closed my laptop slowly. In the mirror above the laundry unit, I watched my reflection blink back at me. He said I was a burden. I was about to become the reason the building still stood. Friday crept up quietly. I skipped the blazer, pulled on boots, wore lipstick, red, not loud, just deliberate. I didn't go to Brewer's office. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood in front of the mirror with my phone, rehearsing my opening lines, not because I planned to speak that day, but because if the moment came, I wouldn't stumble. At 10:46 a.m., Nico texted, "We're live. Next step is yours." I didn't respond. I rolled out the documents across my floor, one by one. Timelines, ownership charts, email printouts, and sat in front of them like a general before the war. This time, I wasn't shaking. This time, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I felt like I had something to protect, and I was done asking for permission to protect it. I signed the final documents in a booth at the co-working space off Spring Street. Nico slid them across the table, his eyes steady, his voice lower than usual. "Effective today, you own a majority stake, through the shell, of course." I looked down at the papers. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just picked up the pen and signed my name, one stroke after the other. He leaned back. "They won't see it coming until you're already sitting at the table." He was right. The ownership transfer went through a private holding entity, clean, legal, anonymous. I didn't want them to know. Not yet. I didn't want the satisfaction of a confrontation. I wanted the silence of strategy, the echo of control. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the side window, red lipstick, hair tied back. Nothing extravagant, just clean lines, clean focus. I wasn't dressing for revenge. I was dressing like someone who'd already won. That afternoon, Brewer Creative began to tremble. Colton's team botched a delivery. A client, the kind of client you never want upset, called the office in a fury. Files were mislabeled. A rollout had gone live with broken links. Their name trended on Twitter, for all the wrong reasons. That client was Ruthie Weller, The same woman who years ago said, "I only work with people who don't waste my time." And I hadn't. Elise texted me just past 4 p.m. "Wish you were here today. It's bad." I read the message, locked my phone, and didn't respond. Ruthie messaged me directly through LinkedIn 20 minutes later. "I miss working with someone who actually listens. Got a minute?" I typed only 2 words. "Tomorrow, noon." At 5:35 p.m., Nico called me. "Emergency board meeting. Colton's rattled. They're requesting guidance." "You going?" I asked. He chuckled. "Not as Nico, as the investor's proxy. I'm already halfway there." That evening, I stayed home. No calls, no questions, just a glass of wine and silence. Later, Nico forwarded me the meeting recording. I watched it alone, in the same basement they'd once said was temporary. Colton opened the meeting with his usual bravado. But it cracked. He stumbled through updates, excuses, blamed the intern, then the timeline, then the internet. Then Nico spoke. "As representative of the lead investor, I'd like to recommend a pause in external releases until we conduct a strategy review. We believe the company has lost internal alignment." Colton tried to push back. "That's not in their purview." Nico didn't blink. "It is now." He didn't mention me by name, but the way Colton's face shifted, he knew. My hand gripped the wineglass stem tighter. I didn't need to be in the room to shake it. That night, I packed a portfolio, printed a copy of my latest proposal, added a handwritten note to the front page. "Thank you for remembering who I was before they tried to unmake me." Then I reached for the napkin. Soft gray, with the S stitched in blue thread. Colton had once looked at that napkin and said, "Too fancy for a basement." Tomorrow, it would sit on a mahogany table. I didn't plan to wave it. I planned to place it down, quiet, firm, and final. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's power that doesn't need applause. Saturday arrived with the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for permission. I got dressed like I had somewhere to be, because this time I did. Blazer pressed, hair pulled back, red lipstick. Not a shade for vanity. A signal. I didn't enter through the side. I walked through the front doors of Brewer Creative like I'd never been erased. The receptionist blinked like she was seeing a ghost. I gave her a polite smile and kept walking. Upstairs, the boardroom buzzed with quiet panic. Nico was already seated, composed, professional, a legal shield in human form. He didn't acknowledge me immediately. He didn't have to. Colton was mid-sentence, voice cracking around the edges. "We're handling the matter internally. It's a simple client misunderstanding." When I stepped inside, he froze. I placed a slim folder on the table and took my seat. "Let's begin." Eyes moved. Chairs shifted. The air lost its rhythm. Colton cleared his throat. "Naomi, this isn't—" Nico raised a hand, firm but calm. "We'll get to that." He turned toward the board. As of Thursday, a new ownership structure was implemented. I represent the controlling interest, and this is Ms. Guy Marlin, acting strategic director under proxy authority. Gasps aren't always audible. Sometimes they're in the way people sit straighter or fidget less. Colton didn't speak. Elise looked like she wanted to, and then Ruthie's face appeared on the screen, joining via Zoom, cool and collected. "Let me save us all some time," she said. "Naomi's the reason I signed the original deal. She's the only one I trust to fix what you've broken." Colton shifted forward. "That's not how our structure—" Ruthie cut him off. "That's how my money works." The silence after that did more than a raised voice ever could. I opened my notebook. No drama, no smugness, just the words, "Year 1 recovery plan." I laid it out. Client realignment, brand relaunch, revised deliverables. Strategy, schedule, responsibility, no fluff, no pitch voice, just business, just the work. Every sentence had weight, every pause felt earned. One by one, faces around the table turned from Colton to me. No applause, just agreement. Elise sat in the corner, quiet, still. I never looked her way. She wasn't the point anymore. Before wrapping up, I reached into my bag and pulled out the linen napkin, the one with the S stitched into the corner. I set it beside my coffee like it belonged there. Colton saw it, his jaw clenched. I looked at him for the first time that day. "You called me a burden," I said. "That burden now holds controlling interest." No one spoke, No one needed to. I stood, gathered my notes, and walked out. Didn't wait for the meeting to adjourn. Didn't ask for a summary. They knew. They all knew. And I didn't need to be the loudest one in the room to be heard. Monday morning brought a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not hollow, settled. I arrived at the office early. The space smelled of lemon oil and new fabric. My own office now, minimalist, bright, built on terms I didn't have to explain to anyone. I was midway through reviewing a proposal when my assistant stepped in, a little hesitant. "There's someone asking to speak with you, says it's urgent." I knew before she said his name. Colton stood in the hallway. His tie was loose, jacket missing. He looked smaller, or maybe I just wasn't looking at him from beneath anymore. He offered a crooked smile that didn't land. Cleared his throat. "I need work," he said. That voice, once full of authority, now quiet, tight. He took a breath. "Thought maybe contract basis? Short term." I didn't respond right away. I stood, not out of superiority, just to be level. He didn't look me in the eye. I gestured for him to come in. "Coffee?" He nodded, more relief than gratitude. And I poured him a cup and sat across from him, not behind the desk. No need for elevation. He reached for the cup with both hands like someone used to holding more. I leaned forward. "Why here? Why now?" He shifted in his seat. "Bridges burned," he mumbled. "You always kept it together." I didn't correct him. I looked him straight on. "You once said I was a burden." He blinked. Didn't speak. "Do you still believe that?" Silence. Not out of defiance. He just didn't have anything left to say. I didn't wait for an answer. I opened the top drawer of my desk, pulled out a single business card, and placed it on the table. He picked it up like it might bite. Founder, Strategic Director. Reclaim Collective. Beneath that, in smaller print, The Burden. Rebranded. He stared at it. "This card isn't for you," I said. "It's for the part of me you tried to erase." He stood after a moment, slower than he used to. Took the card with him. No offer made. No refusal voiced. Just an ending. I watched him leave. That was enough. Later, as I sipped my coffee, I let the weight of the moment settle. Not as victory, but as closure. I remembered the linen napkin, the silent meals, the erased video, the nod he gave me when someone else read my words. None of it made me bitter. It just made me exact. This win didn't erase the years I spent invisible. It didn't heal the scar, but it gave it shape. It gave it meaning. And sometimes that's what you need to move forward, not justice, just acknowledgement. My assistant entered quietly, holding a small frame. "You asked for this," she said, setting it on the shelf. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. Ian. Lala Delia. I read the quote once. Then again. The game hadn't changed. I had.